Hey guys, so I'm out in a meeting today, but I am here available after school in case you have any questions. Just want to go over a couple of things in terms of the agenda. So just a reminder, tomorrow there will be a quick review after school, just going over the multiple choice. Thursday, what we'll do will be the questions, short answer questions. So we'll get that to you, note cards, as well as your document-based question. Just a reminder, the document-based question is on the very front page of the DBQ that the sub handed out, and it is compare and contrast the attitudes of Christianity and Islam towards merchants and trade um, till about 1500. So it's basically the same question that I gave you guys on Tuesday or on Monday in class. Um, Thursday, I will go over the first half of class. I'm going to address all the content looking at the Byzantine Empire, as well as the spread of Christianity. So what I recommend is that you fill out the questions. I will literally go over in our class lecture those responses in class. Okay, so let's get started with this DBQ. So you want to make sure, I would recommend having out your rubric as we go through this DBQ, right? Your DBQ rubric, simply because what I will try to do is I'll try my best to tie that into how you could fit that in to that rubric when you are writing your essay. One thing you want to consider is that you only need to have 3 pieces of evidence for this practice. All right. Although we're aiming to use 6, or by 3 pieces of evidence, I meant 3 documents. All right. Ideally, we'd like to use 6, but just for the sake of this activity, using 3 documents minimum will be fine. If you want to use more than that, I will provide additional points. Okay. So let's go through document 1. So a couple things I want you guys to consider with document 1 is, let's first look at the historical context. If you're looking at the source, this is the Christian Bible. This is the New Testament written by Matthew in about 70 to 80 CE, CE standing for Common Era. First, you want to ask yourself, well, what is the New Testament? What is the Bible? Who is Matthew? What is his relationship to the Bible? So a couple of things that you could mention here for the historical context is that, number one, that Matthew was one of Jesus' disciples. And it says here, then Jesus said unto his disciples. Well, Matthew was one of them. Matthew, what he did was he actually wrote this text in the New Testament, which was part of the Bible. Remember, that's the main difference between Judaism as well as Christianity. They believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and the New Testament are the stories which are written by the disciples, which were Jesus' closest followers, right? So that's Matthew's relationship to the Bible. He wrote this. This is his firsthand account of what Jesus said. Who is the source written for? One of the things that you want to consider when you're looking at this Bible is that typically the New Testament was to give a literal interpretation of Jesus' life, right? When you look at this gospel, it was to tell future Christians specifically how Jesus lived and what his teachings were. For the purpose, I kind of just went over that. I mean, who was intended audience? It was a Christian's purpose was to spread Jesus' stories and his beliefs and his teachings. Now, what we want to really do is break this down is, how does Matthew view trade? So it said, then Jesus unto his disciples, verily I say unto you, that a rich man shall hardly enter into the kingdom of heaven. And again, I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Sorry, guys, that's my pizza that's being made. But anyways, when you're looking at this, how does this view trade? Well, what do you think? I mean, is he supporting trade? What does Matthew say regarding trade? How should merchants behave? Well, in general, you're looking at this is, Jesus says that rich men won't go to heaven. There's a very negative attitude towards merchants and trade. In some ways that you could argue that Matthew is saying here that it becomes very difficult for merchants to make it into heaven, specifically because of the type of work that they need to do, right? So keep that in mind as you're looking at document 1. Document 1, I think, is very important simply because you could relate this to the next one, which is the Quran, but also to the other documents that deal with Christianity as well, right? All right. So document 2. What you want to do for document 2 is the same thing. Ask yourself, as you're going through this, is what's the historical context? What is the Quran? Who is Muhammad? Right? Because we're looking here, if you're looking at my arrow, this is Muslim Quran, which was about 620 to 650 CE. Well, when we look at the historical context here, we want to understand that the Quran, remember, it was written by Muhammad. Muhammad was the messenger, right? He was the prophet, meaning the last messenger, right? Jesus, remember, is a prominent figure in Islam as well, but compared to Christianity, Muslim, or compared to Islam and Christianity, Muhammad, remember, was the last prophet, right? That is the main difference between those two. So who follows the Quran? The intended audience. The intended audience would obviously be Muslims, right? The purpose was to share the teachings of Muhammad with believers. So in some ways, the purpose of this document is to encourage conversion, right? The point of view. How does the author view? How does the author of the Quran view trade? Or looking at this excerpts, where is trade more supported? I want you to compare this to document 1 or document 2, right? So as we're going through here, is the last document said that the rich man won't go into heaven, but this is a little bit different, right? If you're looking through this text, it says, "O ye believers, devour not each other's property among yourselves unlawfully, save that be trading by mutual consent." So this is kind of just saying here, I want you to think about this. What does this mean? Well, when you're looking at it right here, it's saying that you could trade, right? Trade is conditioned. It's different than stealing, right? What we're getting here is that when you trade, that both parties are actively involved in this. Woe to the cheaters, who, when they take measure on their duties for men, take it fully. And when they measure out to others or weigh out from them, they give less than is due. So this is saying trade is okay, right? However, it needs to be done fairly. It needs to be more honest and truthful. One thing I'll do if I were you, this is what I'm doing cognitively here, is this source, document 2, is something that is of the Muslim faith. The other document, document 1, is dealing specifically with Christianity. How are these two things similar or different? Remember, that's part of the question that you're looking at. How will you use these documents? Which one supports trade? Which one doesn't? How are they similar? All right, document 3. Okay. What I'm looking at document 3 here, something you want to consider, is Reginald. He was a monk of Durham. He was a younger contemporary and colleague of St. Godric. When I'm looking at this right here, if I see St. Godric, Saint automatically relates this document to Christianity, right? One thing you also want to understand is the life of St. Godric. If we're looking at the type of document this would be a biography. So the purpose of this document was to provide a biography of St. Godric. It's talking about the life of St. Godric, right? So let's just break down this document. A couple things are going on. You're looking at the life of Godric is here in this paragraph. One of the main things you understand was that it's talking about the profit that he made as a merchant, right? And you can kind of see that he found certain rare, therefore more precious wares, which he carried to other parts were in that when he knew them to be least familiar, right, and coveted by inhabitants beyond the price of gold itself, right? So it's talking about the type of trade that he engaged in. Here it says he lived 16 years as a merchant and began to think of spending on charity, to honor God's service, the good which he had so laboriously acquired. He therefore took the cross as a pilgrim to Jerusalem. So what we're getting in this right here is a little bit different, all right? Remember, the purpose is to provide a diary of St. Godric. The point of view, he's a friend of St. Godric. He's expressing St. Godric's holiness, right? That's what it means to be a saint. To be ordained as a saint in the Christian faith means that you are now one of the closest people in history in terms of relation to God, that you have one hand and you exemplified your holiness. So as we're looking at this document, right, this is the biography of a living mentor, right, as a follower of St. Godric. So he's not going to say anything bad about St. Godric, right? I mean, that's like, for example, you guys writing a biography on Mr. Burba. You guys love me. You're not going to say anything negative about Mr. Burba, right? 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 Well, hopefully not. Well, anyways, that's what's going on here. So that's one thing that we can look at in terms of the bias. But one thing you want to understand is, in some ways, it's saying here that that Godric in some ways symbolized himself as a religious figure, a fair figure, because of what he's doing in this paragraph, right? And one thing I want you to consider when you're going through this document, is this supporting trade? Is it against trade? Think about that in relation to document 1, which talks about Matthew, right? This is Jesus' teachings, New Testament. and compare that to what we're looking at Quran. Which one is a little bit more lenient towards trade? Okay. All right, document 4. So as I'm looking through this, I'm thinking, all right, well, more than likely, is this going to be related to Christianity or is this going to be related to Islam? Well, as I go through this, this is Thomas Aquinas right here. A couple things you want to understand is he's making connection to Matthew right here. It is written in Matthew, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, you also do to them. But no man wishes to buy a thing for more than it's worth. Therefore, no man should sell a thing to another man for more than it's worth. So if I'm you right here, I'm thinking, all right, well, this is written after Matthew, right? This is in 1273. The other document was significantly earlier. What you could do for this research question is you're in some ways kind of trying to find a way to link this document perhaps to document 1. Is it similar? What is it saying about Christianity and the way that they viewed trade, right? So I want you to think about this. What is this saying? All right. I answer this, although altogether sinful, it's every course to deceive in order to sell a thing for more than it's just a price, because this is to deceive one's neighbor so as to injure him. All right. So this is a little bit different here than document 1. There are some similarities and differences, right? I want you to consider, what are they saying about trade, right? This was written by Thomas Aquinas. He was a religious scholar, right? And this is the time of the Dark Ages in Europe, when you're looking at in terms of scholarly texts, was a time where there was a lack of it, right? But I want you to think about the connections between document 2 and 3, right? Document 2 was the Quran. And one thing that you can understand here when you're looking at this document, where did my document go? Looking at document 2, and did I just delete? Oh, here it is. My document 2 with the Quran is, remember, this is talking about fairness as well, right? Document 2 and document 4, although 2 different religious faiths, you could use this in terms of evidence and discuss what are they saying about fairness, right? A couple of things you want to consider is the purpose of this document, right? The purpose is, I want you to think about Christian traders, right? What is their intent to uphold the teachings of the Bible, okay? So when we're looking at this document as well, number 4, this is written during the time of the Dark Ages. So Europe is slowly, in some ways, starting to move its way to the Crusades, right? All right, document 5, almost going through this. So first thing you always want to ask yourself again, well, what is this? I mean, is this a Christian or is this an Islamic text? All right. Well, as we get through this, it definitely says here that this is written by a Muslim scholar, the same way that document 4 was written by a Christian scholar, roughly around the same time frame. Well, this was written by a Muslim scholar in the 1300s. We're looking at the 14th century. So I want you to consider this is, was he a merchant? Does he understand trade? And you can do that for all the documents, right? So far, with every document I think we've looked at, 1 through 5, not one person is directly involved within trade, right? We're only getting the religious point of view, the scholarly religious point of view. When we're looking at this document, document 5, I want you to consider is, how does he view capitalism? How might this connect to other documents, right? You can kind of see this within this. He talks about capitalism. How should it be done? What's the purpose of capitalism? And more importantly, how does this reflect in regards to religious law? All right. Those are some things that you want to consider about document 5. Okay, document 6. I think this is document 6 and 7. I think are 2 documents that you could really use. And what I love about document 6 and 7 is when you look at document 6, the historical context. These are letters coming from Italy, which practiced Catholicism, right? And the reason why I bring this up was, remember, during this time in the 14th century, you would have Eastern Europe, which is part of the Byzantine Empire, which practiced Eastern Orthodox, and in the West, you'd have the Holy Roman Empire. So we want to make sure that we identify that. And you could kind of see this. An important part about this was religious paintings for sale. Remember, religious art was more prominent in the Western Empire than it is in the Eastern Empire, which was against using icons as a symbol of religion, right? So what you want to consider looking at this is also the intended audience. All of these parts, A, B, and C, these are actually 3 different documents. They are all dealing with transactions, all dealing with sales from merchants. And this is the first document that does that, right? So in letter A, for example, you have the order of a religious painting. This is a great exchange between a buyer as well as a seller, right? And in some ways, you could see this as this supports trading for Christian art, right? You tell me you can find no pictures for the money we will pay, for there are none so cheap, right? A pan of Our Lady on a background, a fine gold with 2 doors, making a fine show with good and handsome figures by the best painter. Let there be in the center our Lord. So you're talking here about religious art and what they're willing to pay for that, right? With letter B, this is an interesting document. Letter from a merchant's mother. You know God has granted you to acquire great riches in the world. He may be praised, and you have borne and are bearing great burdens. So with this document, what you're actually getting here is, in some ways, you're getting this merchant mother that's that sees God as giving someone the ability to make money is religiously justifiable, right? I want you to compare this document maybe to document 1. Remember what did document 1, what did Matthew say about those that are rich, right? And you can kind of see this contrast here as we go from the early Common Era to now the 14th century. Is you're getting here, hey, more acceptance of wealth, right? Then letter C, right? Letter placing an order for wool. You say you have a writ to Venice, which is in Italy, to remit us 1,000 ducats, at which in the name of God and prophet you would have to buy gospel wool. With God always before us, we will carry out your bidding. So once again, you're seeing this reference to God in terms of the economy, right? One thing I want you to kind of consider is how is this similar and different to the previous documents, the religious documents, the Christian documents, but as well as the Muslim documents, right? All right, document 7. One thing you want to consider here is I want you to consider document 7 is an Islamic court decision, right? In some ways, we're seeing this document in terms of regulation of trade, right? Some things to consider. Remember, this is a court decision. We talked a little bit about Sharia in Islamic law, what that is. It's just political law in some ways, how it's interpreted in regards to the Quran. Those are some things we can mention in terms of the historical context. The purpose. What's the purpose of this court order, right? It's Islamic court decision in Ankara. But what's the purpose of this? Why would they want to publish this court decision in the 15th and 16th centuries? What I would imagine is to perhaps use this in terms of going over the just how merchants should act regarding business transactions as well as behavior, right? So that's what I have for the audience, right? Point of view, I want you to consider how does this connect with other documents? Consider other merchants and also court orders view. I want you to consider looking at this document. It's based on Islamic law. It's based on merchant trading. It's kind of based. Is it based on fairness? And if you see fairness that's mentioned here, where else do you see fairness? Which other documents that they bring up fairness in regards to Islam, but as well as Christianity? Okay. So all in all, what you want to make sure that you do is remember as you're going through this activity, you want to make sure that you're mentioning, number 1, the historical context. What I recommend for the historical context of your intro is giving me 3 to 4 sentences roughly about the post-classical era, trade, but also could mention information about Christianity as well as Islam. You want to make sure you have your thesis, right? 2 body paragraphs or 3, and then also making sure that you're making reference to the HIP analysis for at least 3 of those documents, connecting that as well to your thesis. We'll hope this helped, guys. If you have any questions, make sure you stop by before you leave today.